Alright, I thought I'd try something a little different. In fact, standing up helps. Get a little bit more power in my voice. Alright, okay. And I'm outside. I just love that highway that's next to the house. I don't know, just cars and their alignment. You know, too big a tire, really? And then using, McPherson suspension, that cheap ass suspension really scrubs tires really bad. Anyhow, and they're using harder rubber nowadays. Anyways, I digress. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is how can you make America great again? Well, how can you make a great country? Okay, so there's some things that economists and ethicists and philosophers, scholars have noticed over the centuries. Okay, so the first idea, if making a great country that is it just cannot be overturned. It can't be overturned by enemies, by power-hungry people inside the country, nothing. Okay, so here it is. Here's my list. Okay, first, I'm going to go with vice. Okay, first we have drugs, right? So they prove that drug addicts have a hole in it somewhere in their mind, and they have to feed that hole. It is, in fact, psychological. It could be gambling, it could be eating, it could be sex, it could be so many different things that people fill the gap. Whether it's by their own doing, by environmental pressures, or by a psychological disorder, we see that the best way is to legalize all drugs like Portugal has done. See, so now the police are being replaced by social workers, and the social workers have determined that these people need psychiatric help. For any reason, really, they've gotten to that point. They need to be in a psychiatric facility. All right. So what? They have 50% less addicts. You'd think they'd have, 5 times as much addicts or 6 times as much addicts, 600% legalizing drugs, and that's just not true. Getting people the help they need and getting people someone to talk to, a companionship, to show them that they're not alone in the world, all that sort of stuff, has worked wonders for the population of Portugal. All right, okay. So gambling, we already have gambling, right? And okay, here's another thing about drugs. I'll go back a little bit. Okay, so they're now spending 90% on healthcare to help addicts, and now they're not having to help nearly as much addicts. They don't have nearly as many overdoses, deaths by overdose, far less medical problems. Okay, so they're not saddled with all this people going to the emergency room all the time, constantly, because they are getting help before there's the real big problem. Well, yeah, it's actually what it comes down to is actually caring for people, right? So they're actually caring for people, and people respond, rather than just throwing people in the clink over and over and over again. The carousel, so there's financial reasons for this also. It makes good sense. You're not spending, an arm and a leg on police enforcement. And they're not worked to death. The police aren't, running around like a chicken with their heads cut off, and worried about being battered, and then people are getting upset and battering the cops and being angry at the cops and being hostile towards the police, and just so many social ramifications. But there really are psychological ramifications of the individual. But when you have it happening on a mass scale, it becomes a social problem, right? Okay, so in gambling, people just have the right to blow their money, spend their money any damn way they choose. And no one should ever tell them they don't have the right to spend their money, their hard-earned paycheck. If they want to spend it on, going to the gambling casino, that's their right. And unfortunately, some people will spend it on gambling rather than feeding their families, right? But we get awareness going, and we get everybody involved, and we get there's the big C word again: care. Care equals action. Get care to those people. Help get them to addiction centers and things like that, so they're not ripping off their families, and not doing their duty to their family and maybe even society, even depends on the situation, right? I hate that word, society. How about civilization there? Okay, so then there's prostitution. Well, prostitution is women caring for men. Yeah. So what prostitution helps with is abuse against women. As long as there's a completely open and honest view towards prostitution, women help men, help themselves. They help women, and they have this symbiotic, cyclical relationship. It's a human process. So we say that not allowing prostitution as part of vice is really, these are all legislating against the self-rule, and that's legislating against nature, anti-nature legislation, and it's terrible, and it's profitable for women, and there's plenty of women that don't have a problem with that. They just don't have a problem with using their bodies as they wish to, as they desire, and making men happy and making a lot of money and doing it. Okay, so as we can see, that vice is the first way to relieve stress in civilization. Okay, we know that men are far less likely to abuse women and children if there's access to prostitutes, and of course that's their hard-earned money. And whether it's a woman, man or woman, looking for a prostitute, that's their own. It's their own prerogative as a self-ruled, sovereign entity being, if you wish to say, right? So here we just have the nanny state, moralists, dictating things that are contrary to human nature, and we see that we pay for it in violence, mostly in larger cities. Major violence. I don't want to even get into that argument of how many majors there are in a system that strikes itself. Okay, I can make that argument too, and that's a horrendous argument for the government. 3 strikes on the government and they're out, huh? Okay, so let's see, taxation. We have income tax, right? So we abolish corporate tax because why add tax just because you're a corporation? That doesn't make any sense at all. That's just a rationalization. It's like 10% of the total tax revenue. It's $265 billion. That's what I heard. That's what I saw in a figure. I don't know if that's actually true, But the idea is we get rid of that tax, the corporate tax, and we go with the low income tax, somewhere around 14%, right? You think, well, you can't live on that. Well, what you have is a consumption tax on that, on top of that. So it's a split tax, income tax and a consumption tax. Okay, what this does. Okay, this is a difficult concept for some people to understand. It's called a kick. Okay, you have a variable percentage rate on the consumption depending on the goods being sold. We don't put of course, a consumption tax on services. There's a good reason for that, is because of the kick. There is no kick on services. There's a kick on goods. So that means that there's a what we call a ledger write down. What it does is that say that the bottom line is now flexible. I'll get into that later, but that is a completely solid concept. Okay. So, what this does is it pays out. Okay, a payout is like gambling, right? You go, or you put your money on the card table, and there's a payout. The payout says, okay, so many people are involved. The payout is X amount of dollars. Okay, but it's like an infinite payout. It's almost like hitting the one-armed bandit, the gambling machine. I'm having a hard time what the gambling machine is called, but you all get that, right? So you come up with all sevens, right, and you get a big payout. That's called anarcho-communism. Excuse me, capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism, where everybody is now paying each other out. I will get into this later. It's getting late. My brain is bogging down. But yeah, okay. So, when you have taxes this low, what it allows people to do is to pay, they pay their Social Security pension. So we get rid of Social Security, right? Now we have a pension, private pension, whatever it may be, a 401k type thing, as they do in many other countries. They don't have Social Security. They have something like a 401k. On top of that, you could also have your investment portfolio. So now, American families have their 401k. They have their investment portfolio. That's what we call hyper-economy. We have hyper-economy rule systems where money is being completely divested round and round in cycles. Except for 401k, but that could also be a divestment cycle. That could be part of a portfolio of a larger corporation. So money is always cycling and compounding itself. So that's why we say it's a hyper economy. See, we are just going about this the wrong way. We're not really thinking out of the box. It's the box. It's the power box. It's that control article. People can't just see past this idea that the top must exert power on the people, and it's not. And it's really the other way around. The people have a proxy in the government, and the government's supposed to come up with these nifty ideas to create a great economy. So vice, different form of taxation, and I would say, putting logic, as part of the Constitution, really. Everything must be figured out by a scientific probe. There must be forensic methods of measuring everything, really, or you can't do it. You can't just increase a 0.5% tax rate hike and say, well, we just think that's appropriate. No, you actually have to You have to run it through, bean counters, and they have to count everything and account for everything and put it into a exhaustive report, not just a comprehensive report that just touches on things and, well, see, this is what we're doing and this is what we're doing over here, and, well, we're supposed to be doing all this shit anyways, but we'll take credit for it because people aren't really aware that, that's our job. You don't get credit for you doing your job. What you do is you get credit for going above and beyond, right? Be coming up with better ways to help people and make it all fiscally solvent. I am missing something, okay, but those three things really, federalism, techno-federalism. That's an interesting idea. Everybody's on the same page, right? Everybody's working off of a point system, not like scoring points, but where you go, rule 1.6.3. So you figure out every single rule possible, and the states abide by all those rules. They just pick out what they need, and then it's approved. They say, look, this is what this state needs, and we figured it out all on points. We instead of 1.8.3, we need 1.7.9. And here's why, and we have all the proof. We've proved all of this. All right, we come up with scientific processes for everything. It's no longer haphazard. It's no longer jackass rulemaking. Arse rulemaking. Just we got to make up rules to stay relevant. Because if we don't come up with rules and more rules, people may not think we're doing our job. It's a crazy system of government to not have a standardized systems for everything that's possible to be standardized. So, I'm for a techno federal government. If you put in logics in place and ethics, or really just traps of logic. You don't even need ethics. Maybe a few, but just all the way to trap logic to trap out bad processes that don't work for economy, that don't work for people, and basically no nanny state. That's another one. Stay the fuck out of people's business. It is a libertarian government that I propose, but how can you argue it? That is exactly the way government should be run. Socialism sucks. Debunked. People's sense of I read this in a book that's thousands of years old, and that gives me the right to thug people and tell people that they can't exchange money in their own bedrooms, or even I'll even come out in support of homosexuals being able to be in their own bedrooms without the government coming in and saying, well, sodomy laws, sodomy. There's no more laws on sodomy, of course, but those are two adults. They can do whatever the hell they want. But if the Bible clan had their way, they would not be able to do what they want. It would be there'd be sodomy laws, there'd be homosexuality laws. We see over in the Middle East, homosexuals are being murdered if they get caught in the act, and there's a number of people. I wouldn't say there's a majority, but there's a not small majority. But even so, that's a lot of people that would agree with that. Bringing back stoning and public beatings and all sorts of shit. Anyways, that's about the end. Thank you.